Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to another session of microeconomics. Today, we'll look at elasticity. First, we're going to start with price elasticity of demand. When the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded will what? Fall. That is common sense. That much is fairly obvious. But in most cases, we will want to know more than this. We will want to know by just how much the quantity demanded will fall. In other words, we will want to know how responsive demand is to a rise in price. Take the case of two products, oil and cauliflower. In the case of oil, a rise in a price is likely to result in only a slight fall in the quantity demanded. Why? If people want to continue driving, they have to pay the higher prices for fuel. A few may turn to riding bicycles. Some people may try to make fewer journeys, but for most people, a rising price of petrol and diesel will make little difference to how much they use their cars. In the case of cauliflowers, however, a rise in the price may lead to a substantial fall in the quantity demanded. The reason is that there are alternative vegetables and that people can buy. Many people, when buying vegetables, are very cautious of their prices, are conscious of their prices, and will buy whatever is reasonably priced. We call this the responsiveness. We call the responsiveness of demand to a change in price the price elasticity of demand. In other words, it means price elasticity of demand means the responsiveness of quantity demanded to our change in price. Please pause the video and write down this definition. Now, it is considered one of the most important concepts in economics. For example, if we know the price elasticity of demand for a product, we can predict the effect on price and quantity of a shift in the supply curve for that product. Figure 2.11 shows the effect of a shift in supply with two quite different curves, D and D1. Let me show you them now. You have curve D and you have curve what? D1. Notice curve D is what? Don't want something, but curve D1 is slightly going up. It is said that curve D1 is more elastic than curve D. In other words, for a given change in price, there will be a larger change in quantity demanded along curve D1 than along curve D. Assume that quantity Assume that initially the supply curve is S1 and that it intersects with both demand curves at what? Point A. That is point A, right? At a price of what? P1 and a quantity of Q1. Now, supply shifts to what? S2. Good. What will happen to price and quantity? In the case of the less elastic curve, which is D, there is a relatively larger rise in price to what? To P what? 2 movement along. To P2, no so. And a relatively small fall in quantity to what? To Q2. Alright? Equilibrium is at point what? B. In the case of the elastic demand, which is D1, this curve D1, however, there is only a relatively small rise in price to what? P3. Alright, from here, price to here, right? From here to here. from P1 to P3. Alright. So there's a in case of more elastic demand, the curve D1, there's a only a relatively small rise in what? Price to P3. But a relatively large what? Fall in quantity to what? Q3. Equilibrium now is at point what? C. Alright? Note that. We're going to look now at measuring the price elasticity of demand. If you didn't get that part so clearly, watch this part now. This is very careful. This part is extremely important that you know this part. Alright? Let's roll. What we want to compare is the size of the change in quantity demanded with the size of the change in price. Alright? But since price and quantity are measured in different units, the only sensible way we can do this is to use percentage or proportionate changes. This gives us the following formula for the price elasticity of demand for a product. The formula goes like this: percentage or proportionate change in quantity demanded, which is this right there, divided by what? Percentage change or proportionate change in what? Price, which is this. Putting this symbol together, we get this symbol here, price elasticity of demand, equal what? Percentage change in quantity demanded divided by what? Percentage change in price, where this symbol right here means what? Greek epsilon, which is a symbol we use for elasticity, and this triangle looking thing represents what? Capital Greek delta is a symbol we use for a change in. Thus, if a 40% rise in price of oil cause the quantity demanded to fall by a mere 10%, the price elasticity of oil over this range will be what? Negative 10%, which is what? The quantity change in quantity demanded divided by what? Percentage change in what? Price, which is negative 0.25. Whereas if a 5% fall in the price of cauliflowers cause a 50% rise in the quantity demanded, the price elasticity of demand for cauliflowers over this range would be what? 50% divided by negative 5%. Notice that it was what? The price which fell, negative 3. Cauliflowers have a more elastic demand than oil, and this is shown by the figures. But just what do these figures really show? What significance of minus 0.5 and minus 3? Let's go further into detail. Interpreting the figure of elasticity. The use of proportionate or percentage measures. Elasticity is measured in proportionate or percentage terms for the following reasons. It allows comparison of changes in two qualitatively different things, which are thus measured in two different types of units. That is, it allows comparison of quantity changes with what? Monetary changes. It is the only sensible way of deciding how big a change in price or quantity is. Take a simple example. An item goes up in price by £1. Is this a big increase or a small increase? We can answer this only if we know what the original price was. If a can of beans goes up in price by £1, there's a huge price increase. If, however, the price of a house goes up by £1, that is a tiny price increase. In other words, it is a percentage or proportionate increase in price that determines how big a price it is. Now, look at this sign, are be negative or positive. Demand curves are generally downward sloping. No, so this means that price and quantity change in what? Opposite directions. A rise in price, which is a positive figure, will cause a fall in what? Quantity demanded, which is a negative figure. Similarly, a fall in price will cause a what? Rise in quantity demanded. Thus, when working out the price elasticity of demand, we either divide a negative figure by a positive figure or a positive figure by a negative figure. Either way, we end up with a negative figure. And here's the formula again. If you want to write it down, pause the video, write it down for me, please. Now, if we now ignore the negative sign, watch this now carefully, and just concentrate on the value of the figure, this tells us whether demand is what? Elastic or inelastic. Now, elastic now is where what? The figure is more than what? 1. Elastic is, this is where a change in price causes what? A proportionate larger change in what? Quantity demanded. In this case, the value of elasticity will be greater than what? 1. Since we are dividing a larger figure by a what? Smaller figure. Now I'll go back up to this section. This is the reason why this cauliflower is more elastic than what? Than the price of oil. Because what? 3 is greater than 1. Alright? Inelastic now refers to where the figure is what? Less than 1. This is where a change in price causes a what? Proportionate smaller change in what? Quantity demanded. In this case, elasticity will be what? Less than 1. Since we are dividing the smaller figure by a what? Larger figure. Now, this is the reason why this is what you call what? This. So, oil then is what? Inelastic. Because the figure is what? Less than 1. 0.25 is less than 1. Hope you are getting it clearly, gentle folks. Unit elastic now. So, we are looking at different phases now, right? Unit elasticity of demand occurs where price and quantity demanded change by the what? Same proportion. This will give an elasticity equal to 1, since we are dividing a figure by itself. Alright. Now we're going to look at the determinants of price elasticity quickly. And they are inclusive of. So the price elasticity of demand varies enormously from one product to another. For example, the demand for a holiday in any given resort typically has a price elasticity greater than 5, whereas demand for electricity has a price elasticity less than 1, 0.5. But why do some products have a highly elastic demand, whereas others have a what? Highly inelastic demand? What determines price elasticity of demand? So, number one, first determinant is the number one and closeness of substitute. This is the most important determinant. The more substitutes there are for a good, and the closer they are, the more will people who switch to these alternatives when the price of the good rises. The greater, therefore, will be the what? Price elasticity of demand. So the more substitutes there are for a good, and the closer they are, the more will people switch to what? These alternatives. When the price elasticity of good when the price of good rises, the greater therefore will be the what? Price elasticity of demand. Remember, it says price elasticity of demand is what? Responsiveness. Remember, the responsiveness of what? Quantity demanded to our change in price. Returning to our examples of oil and cauliflowers, there is no close substitute for oil, and thus demand is what? Relatively elastic. There are plenty of alternatives to cauliflowers, however, and thus demand is what? Relatively elastic. So the substitute for oil, there are no close substitute for oil, and thus demand is what? Relatively what? Inelastic. There are plenty of alternatives for cauliflowers, and therefore demand is what? Relatively elastic. So those are the good things you have to remember. The next determinant of Elasticity of demand is the proportion of income spent on the good. The higher the proportion of our income we spend on a good, the more we will be forced to cut consumption when its price rise. The bigger will be the income effect and the more elastic will be the demand. Thus, salt has a very low price elasticity of demand. Part of the reason is that there is no close substitute for salt, but part is that we spend such a tiny fraction of our income on salt that we could find little difficulty in paying a relatively large percentage increase in its price. The income effect of a price rise would be very small. By contrast, there will be a much bigger income effect when a major item of expenditure rises in price. For example, if mortgage interest rates rise, people may have to cut down substantially on their demand for what? Housing, being forced to buy somewhere much smaller and cheaper or to live in a what? Rented accommodation. Alright? The next determinant of price elasticity of demand is what? Time period, which is the last one that we look at. When the price rises, people may take a time to adjust their consumption patterns and find alternatives. The longer the time period after a price change, then the more elastic is the demand likely to be. Right? Good. You can read this for yourself. You can pause the video and read it through for yourself before we get to the next part. Now there are some terms for you to remember. Elastic demand is where quantity demanded changes by what? A larger percentage than price. Ignoring the negative sign, it will have a what? Value greater than 1. So a demand is elastic when the value is greater than what? 1. Please remember that. In elastic demand, now, where quantity demanded changes by a smaller percentage than price, ignoring this negative sign, it will what? Have a value less than 1. Unit elasticity of demand now, where quantity demanded changes by the same percentage as price. Ignoring this sign, it will have a value equal to 1.